In this video, we're going to talk about trade, specialization, and exchange. Now, for this example, I'm going to use two countries. In this hypothetical, we've got the United States and India. Why those? Well, I just happen to have those graphics. But the example can hold for other bilateral pairs of countries. For the sake of simplicity, we're going to say that each country produces a couple commodities. They produce cars and they produce food through their agricultural sector. Each one has different amounts, and they devote different amounts of their economy to that. So to try and illustrate it analytically, let's say that each country has 4 units of labor. Those 4 units could be hundreds of millions of people, 10,000 people. It doesn't really matter. We're just going to say units for the sake of simplicity. Every country will have a different labor endowment, and there will be differences in productivity across jurisdictions. So each country divides those equally between food and cars. So in our case, we've got 2 units of labor, each commodity from each country. And each one has a different set of outputs. The United States, 50 units of food, 50 units of cars. India, 200 units of food, 100 units of cars. We look at these numbers and we notice that India clearly is producing more. So we would say that it has an absolute advantage overall. It is producing more per unit of labor than the United States across both commodities. Therefore, it has an absolute advantage. However, it has a comparative advantage in food production. And what we mean by that, if you think about 1 unit of labor, that gets 100 units of food. 1 unit of labor gets 50 units of cars. Much fewer cars than if that labor was allocated to food. Food is more productive compared to cars and more productive compared to the Americans. So we would say that they have a comparative advantage. They are comparatively more productive in food than the Americans. 100 units compared to 50 units. Now, what could happen here is that the countries could decide to specialize in the thing that they are comparatively good at. So how might that work? The USA could shift 2 units of labor from food to cars. So why they'll do that, I'll explain why they do that in a minute. India would shift 1 unit of labor from car to food. Remember that comparative advantage. They're giving up less in cars to get more in food. So each country has made some shifts in their allocations of labor. It's also changed how much they produce. USA is now 100 cars, 0 food. India 300 food, only 50 cars. What that has done, however, to the global totals, it has increased the overall production. All we've done here is reallocate the labor, and we've been able to produce more totally. Just to look at this visually, we can see before specialization and then after specialization. By reallocating the labor, specializing in the things you're comparatively good at, these 2 countries were able to increase the total amount available to both countries. Well, why on earth did the US switch when it seems like they were reasonably productive at both? Well, now, since they were comparatively good at cars compared to India, who was comparatively good at food, each country can now trade their surplus for the thing that they're less productive at. US can trade 50 units of extra cars to India. In return, India could agree to send 75 units of food to the United States. By specializing in what they're good at, each country has created a surplus beyond what they would normally use, so they can trade that for other stuff that they're not as good at, not as competitive at. We haven't changed anything here except the allocation, the distribution of labor. The output hasn't changed. So, just to recap, we can see before specialization, the output is 50-50, 200-100. After specialization and trade, however, each country is getting something that they didn't have before. India's got more food. The United States has more food as well. Both countries have the same number of cars, same units. So both countries have been made better off. By specializing in what they were good at, trading the surplus, both countries have been made better off. However, is everyone better off? Probably not. India agreed to half their industrial workforce that produces cars. The United States basically agreed to stop producing food. What happens if you're a farmer in that system? There would definitely be some disruptions in the labor market as people were forced out of one industry as it closed. So that's something that needs to be thought of when we're talking about specialization in trade. Yeah, it might benefit overall in aggregate terms, but specifically, some people are much worse off. That's something we'll explore in upcoming videos.